Hi, Nimrod. How are you?
Hi, Debbie. Thank you. I'm well. How are you?
I am very excited to be speaking with you about Retribution. This is, I'm going to be perfectly blunt here. I fucking love this movie.
Wow, you rock. Can we talk more often?
Anytime you want. This is classic Liam Neeson. It's, of course, he doesn't have to do as much running around as he did in his younger days, but you contain all of this action and tension within the car. This is like taking his classics like Non-Stop and The Commuter from a plane and a train and putting it in a car, and you just knock it out of the park.
Thank you. It was when the opportunity came and they had asked, is making a film with Liam Neeson something that appeals to you? I thought it was a rhetorical question. I mean, he's such an awesome performer, and then I was really lucky to kind of understand what a wonderful human being he is on top of it, as I had the opportunity to work with him. And yeah, his energy, his focus, and his passion was something he brought every single day, and it translates. It really does.
It truly does. I mean, right down to, and this is kudos to your cinematographer, to Flavio, who has shot Neeson in a few other action films. But right down to the camera shots, the close-ups of his hand gripping the steering wheel. You can see the white knuckling and the tension as he is rolling his clenched fist around that steering wheel. And those little things add so much power to the fear and tension here. It just amazed me, the detail that you captured within a car and the tension you brought out.
Thank you for clocking that. I mean, every film any film I approach, I tend to storyboard, and the reason is to discover those moments before we ever even get to the floor. Because when you're in such a contained space, that confined space, you're trying to take advantage of any opportunity, right? And in something like this, putting the camera inside the windshield or putting the camera outside the windshield means two completely different things.
Mm-hmm.
So we were very, very focused on trying to exploit as much of the detail, as you put it, that we could.
It reminded me very much of what Stephen Knight did with Locke and Tom Hardy. Of course, wow. I think Stephen had 16 cameras, GoPros and cameras inside the car, if I recall my interview with Stephen. But you and Flavio did very much the same thing here by constantly changing the views, changing the angles. I love the fact we keep getting different perspectives and POVs within the car itself and even looking outside the car. I mean, right down to his foot on the gas pedal. So you're constantly keeping us visually engaged. It's not just somebody riding around in a car. So I'm really curious how you and Flavio went about developing this visual grammar to even give us the Dutching power positions within the car, especially when we're looking at the text messaging, the phone, and live person. So incredibly well done from a storytelling standpoint to maintain and shift power back and forth.
Yeah, it was really, what was most appealing is how do you accepting the challenge, how do you keep it suspenseful? How do you keep it cinematic? How do you augment and enhance the emotions that they're experiencing through the camera composition and the movement? And it's storyboarding every single frame out before we even get to the floor. And mean that you can't pivot or change on the day.
Mm-hmm.
Often something will present itself that you didn't think of, or something will present itself that is far better than what your initial intention was. But for the most part, I think, especially in something so confined, the boards really do help the filmmakers kind of have a sense of where you were and where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, I would just say the storyboards here were a tool that really helped us focus on those moments. But then, beyond the camera moves and beyond putting it in the right place and finding those details, it really did come down to the performers, their performances, Liam's ability and openness to play the character vulnerable. You know, there's a lot of the family dynamic playing out in addition to the suspense, action, and the thrills of it all. And I think what really ultimately allows you to connect with these characters were the sick performances that Liam, Jack Champion, Lilly Aspell, Noma Dumezweni, Matthew Modine, they all brought this incredible focus and energy every day. So without them leading the charge as far as the emotions, it really, all our camera movements and comps would have just fell short had it not been for the incredible performances that they gave us.
Bringing up Noma, who I think you cast perfectly as the inspector. I love what you do metaphorically in terms of leveling the playing field between Matt Turner and the inspector. Because first she's standing up, she's looking down, she's got the power play, and slowly the camera she comes down so that we've got them on level playing fields, eye level, as she's talking to him inside the car. And you do that with several other characters in the film as well, one of which I'm not going to mention because it'll be a big spoiler and I don't want that. But I love how you use that technique from a metaphoric standpoint to convey so much. And jumping from Noma, you scored. You knocked it out of the park with Jack and Lilly, casting them.
Man.
Oh my!
Our casting director, Rory, our casting director, really played a huge role in that. And you are a 100. This film, of course, without Liam, this thing isn't working. But if Jack and Lilly didn't bring what they brought and didn't bring the quality of performance that they did, the film wouldn't be what it is.
Yeah.
And they both, I was so terrified initially in the script with these two kids, man. It was, the whole thing can bleed out if that isn't working. and day one, I just remember looking at the producers after Lilly and Jack's argument. That was one of the earlier things we captured in the home. And right away, this warmth kind of washed over me. This level of comfort suddenly washed over me, understanding that I was dealing with some real players.
Lilly is a scene stealer, and the camera loves her.
I'm writing something right now, and there's two actors involved, and Lily's one of them.
Oh, she is amazing. And, the chemistry between Jack and Lilly is so authentic, so resonant.
Yeah. And by the way, much to their credit, super cool kids, just grounded, humble, passionate, prepared. I remember day after day, just going up to them, going, "You guys are rock stars," and I meant it completely sincerely. They were such an awesome team, and individually, just what cool human beings. It's like, I know that we're all going through moments of darkness these past few years, and I gotta say, man, when I see those two kids, I'm like, okay, there's hope. We're gonna be okay.
Watching the two of them and their relationship change as this film progresses is fantastic. But watching them and their attitude towards their father is what really gets to the heart of this film, because this is not just an action film, a thriller. There is so much heart in this film between a father and his children. And it really, you have it paced very, very well as we see this relationship shift dramatically, especially between Jack's character and Matt.
Yeah, and you know, one of the crazy. I mean, look, I don't want to spoil anything either, so I'm a little bit reluctant to bring up examples. But I think the reason, if people are responding to the film, I think the reason that maybe a lot of people won't consciously understand is the vulnerability that Liam and the children offer up in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's really touching, and it's really authentic and sincere. And yeah, I'm a better filmmaker after that movie, having worked with those kids and Liam, than I was going into it. It's incredible. They really elevated my game with the commitment that they arrived with every day.
I have to say, it's so nice to see a father going the extra mile for his children. It's not something we see that often. It's always the mother protecting the kids, not the father. But with Liam, he set the tone for that with the Taken series, protecting his daughter. So this is almost coming full circle for him.
Yeah, and I love that. I think I was speaking to someone earlier, and they had mentioned that modern, somehow along the way, leading men almost shunned vulnerability, right?
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be this presentation of cool and macho and all the rest, and that is fine. But I think without being balanced out and without having the actual humanity side of it present, it becomes a bit like a facade. And in this case, I think it goes so much deeper because of Liam's willingness to express and perform that vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the cinema world was knocked on its heels many decades ago when Cary Grant cried in Penny Serenade. Nobody had ever seen that kind of vulnerability from a leading man before. So to see you visit that level of vulnerability here, I just so appreciate that you went there and that he went there with it.
Yeah, no, I was too. And in the editing room, there was that moment where it was that kind of like, slap yourself in the head moment where you go, why haven't I seen this in the last 20 years?
Yeah.
Why wasn't this as apparent to me as it is right now? And I think that the film's success has so much to do with that.
Speaking of being in the editing room here, talk to me about working with Steve Merkovich. Steve is so good with tension and thrillers. I mean, just look at Escape Room. Even a film like Risen, he builds tension in the edit and the pacing in there, going all the way back to Con Air or Big Trouble in Little China. So he captures emotion and action. And you guys really have this very perfectly paced for building tension.
I have 5 words for you with Steve Merkovich.
Yes.
Best post experience ever had.
I can't say enough about what I'm seeing on screen in terms of Steve's editing.
His process and the time spent with him was not only creatively exhilarating, but it was like hanging out with my brother. Just someone who I could talk to about anything, and then we'd be chit-chatting about life for half an hour, and then he'd go, "Oh yeah, let me show you something really quick," and it would be stunning. And then I also have to, that entire post team that was with Steve was listen, I can't say enough about the post experience of this film. I also have to mention the incredibly talented Terry Gregson Williams.
Oh my God, the score is great.
I mean, between him and Steve and just the entire post team, thank you was not enough.
I'm curious, Nimrod, how challenging was it in finding the proper pacing for this film and working with your post work with the use of text messages and the phone? So easily you could have drawn us into a Timur Bekmambetov screen life kind of film, constantly on the phone with the text and the calls and the text and the calls. You didn't do that. And even when we're seeing text messages, many times it's the phone is laying on the passenger seat. It's not the only thing consuming the screen. So I'm curious how challenging that was to really utilize that without having it destroy the overall film.
That's a great question. There was two things that I can attribute that to. One, very early on in the process, working on the screenplay, there was an attempt to simplify. There was a few more devices in some of the earlier iterations, and I wanted to really strip it down to the most simple form. So part of it was, first and foremost, just trying to focus on lessening the devices just in general, right? But then on top of that, we tried to give the devices that do play a role, we wanted to give them a character. We wanted these devices to feel like characters on their own. So if you recall the nefarious phone,
yes,
for lack of a better word, it looks rough.
Yeah.
It's cracked and it's held together by rubber bands, and it has its own character. Even the bomb with the pressure plate indicator. These were all things that kind of, much like HAL in 2001, we tried to give these devices their own characters. So I think that also played a role in it, and then of course just understanding that the real story is being told on the actors' faces,
right,
not on the devices. So these were all considerations as we were making the film.
You definitely applied all of those considerations perfectly, Nimrod. I'm curious about your color palette. You've got a couple different things happening with color. Particularly, we're inside the car. It's a little bit denatured. It is not saturated. Saturation we see in the bomb and the pressure plate, and that's really the only big color pop with red, yellow, and green, as we're seeing there. But you leave color to the exterior world and some of these old world buildings. And in the third act in particular, I notice your saturation comes up incrementally at a time. So I'm curious about your thoughts with the color palette design.
Well, again, we had a really talented colorist, and I want to make sure I'm getting his name right, and Mitch Paulson, I believe, and just a super, super talented guy. So again, I was surrounded by some very, very talented folks. But Berlin itself and the city itself dictated a lot of that, from the get-go. And sometimes working within the confines, much like the story itself, as a filmmaker, you have to embrace what's given. So in that regard, some of it was very much just by virtue of what the city was presenting to us at the time. But, Mitch and Flavio and myself, we spent a lot of time having those conversations. But Mitch is really the key here, just someone who really, again, you're only as talented as the people you're surrounded by. And fortunately, I was surrounded by rock stars.
You definitely were, and the proof is in the pudding on the screen, Nimrod. I've got, one last question for you. I loved what you did with Vacancy many years ago. I see your growth as a filmmaker from then to now. So I'm curious what you learned about yourself as a filmmaker in making Retribution that you will now be able to take forward into your future films.
That's another great question. I think what I'm beginning to understand more and more over the past year or so is how much of my role is one of service and understanding it and approaching it as such. You know, it's a strange thing, especially when you're writing your own projects, even though I did not write Retribution, but it's an ego-born process a bit, right? But then as you start to move forward and you start to understand that the best work coming out are the collaborations and is ensuring that the people you're working with, not only the people you're working with feel that you are there to service them. I don't know if you're understanding what I'm trying to say, but
No.
I'm trying really, really hard nowadays to better understand that I'm there to really help and elevate a lot of folks, and by doing so, they help and elevate me. Does that make any sense?
It makes perfect sense, Nimrod. Perfect.
Yeah, so I think that's what I'm getting a little bit older, and I'm still an idiot, and there's still a lot I gotta learn, but there's definitely a better understanding of coming from a place of service as opposed to another place, whatever that may be.
Well, anybody that watches Retribution the word idiot will never come into their mind. I guarantee you. Again, I love this film so much.
I really appreciate your passion for it. Thank you for those words. It means a lot.
This will become part of, once it's available digitally or on DVD, Blu-ray, this will become part of my Neeson arsenal. I can tell you that. For binge sessions that will go on forever. Just so well done, Nimrod. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Man, that's really, really, I've gotten my butt kicked a bit in this business, and I gotta tell you, when you get a little love and you have, and you can feel the sincerity in it, it's really the gasoline for me. And I say that with the utmost sincerity, so thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for making this film, and I can't wait to see what you bring me next.
I hope I'm doing something soon, so thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Nimrod, and I hope we get to chat again in the future.
I do too. I really do appreciate you.